I'm a bit mystified to be speaking about health because I'm a news journalist. I write about politics, and I definitely don't think about health because I'm always ill myself. But like a good journalist, I have views on these matters. And since we are here to really, this entire point of meeting is to try and deepen our understanding of each other's cultures and perhaps to learn from each other. So I'm going to focus on two aspects of how India thinks about health. One is an aspect that I think India can offer to the rest of the world, certainly to the West. And another aspect where I believe that we can learn from the West, and we haven't been learning for the last 500 millennia. So to begin with, I think, in the tradition of the way India looks at health, and everything about India is contradictory and complicated, and certainly its approach to health is contradictory and complicated. But in Indian tradition, India has set great significance and store by the idea of aura, by the idea of intuition, by the idea of a psychic being, the heart, not as an organ, but what this morning somebody referred to as that subtlest of subtle things, the inner being. And the fact that Indian health traditions have laid significance and store by that, I think is perhaps the most profound gift that India has given to the West. This belief in and a value for that which you can't see. And the West, in fact, has lost touch with that. But unlike India and its approach to the West has been taking this tradition from India and incorporating it into its life. And, we have a plethora of that. We have, of course, yoga, you have mantras, you have psychic healing, you have crystal healing, you have naturopathy, you have acupressure, you have acupuncture, you have the Buddhist traditions, which just feel your pulse, you have Tibetan medicine, all of which does not have any rationale in terms of empirical methods. And like all good modern Indians, we hold great disregard for all these traditions. And while I was a journalist, not with Tehelka, but in my earlier, less illustrious life at Outlook, I was doing a story on these, what we look down on as traditional practices and alternative medicine. And it was a very humbling experience because even while I continued to have a healthy disregard for it, I found a lot of practitioners that completely blew my mind. I met a woman 2 blocks from my office who I've never met before, and this is a story that I'm telling you about myself, who was a very bright, vivacious woman, middle class, nothing hokey-pokey about her, and she was supposed to be an aura reader. So I said, so read me, She said, no, it doesn't work like that. When you're very skeptical, it doesn't work. I said, no, I'm not being skeptical, just read me. And so I sat there, and she held my hand, and she closed her eyes, and she said, do you have a heart condition? So I said, no. She said, no, think. Have you ever had a heart condition? And it was amazing because I looked back to my childhood when I was about 10 or 12 and I had this, how do you pronounce it, trachycardia. And, I actually had to take a lot of medication which I'd forgotten about. And she said, you've had this condition, it's better, but it's still there. It can come up anytime. And it was amazing. She just sat there and she said, you have asthma, you have a lot of allergies. This is a woman I have just met like a minute back. So she told me she reads grids and she's able to read people's personalities and aura and all of that. And then, there were n number of other practitioners who surprised you, who read you, who were able to tell things about you that nobody should know. And then, of course, there are the hacks that get it all wrong. So it is in that area of irrationality, of unscientific, coincidence in which all these traditions reside. But again, coming very close home, somebody that's very, very dear to me has been going through an extremely hard time, has tried allopathic medicines, has tried placebos, has tried everything that can deal with anxiety, which manifests itself in real physical distress. And nothing, no medicine, no empirical medicine has worked until she started doing this Buddhist chanting. And today, this person who is absolutely very, very dear to me is a transformed human being. She is healed in its most essential and profound way. She is healed today because she is a different person. Her circumstances haven't changed, her responses to it have changed, and it has come out of this Buddhist chanting. So those are just 2 very tiny and insubstantial vignettes into just what this whole, undocumented area of healing traditions is. And yoga, of course, is something that has a scientific basis. It explains itself, and its efficacy is being felt by millions. And you only have to see some of the New Age gurus and the power they wield, not just on Indians, but the world, to understand how efficacious those practices are. Somebody like Baba Ramdev, I don't know if any of you have heard of him, is a horrible human being, very corrupt, but his practices are so superb that he has a following of many million. He runs an empire that now is about 10,000 crore. And all of that comes not because people are just buying into some illusion, but because they feel that in their lives. And then, of course, there is a very luminous lawyer called Ram Jethmalani, a criminal lawyer, one of our best, bit maverick, but really as a mind, the very best. And his daughter was extremely ill, has had a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, was on the verge of death. And he took her to the Sai Baba in I think, Hyderabad. And he says that the Sai Baba just touched her. And, the doctors had said she was dying like the next day. And she lived another 3 or 4 years. Now, again, it is that irrational space of belief, what the mind can do to the body when you believe. I think that is something that India has a huge contribution to give to the rest of the world. But then there is the alternate, the contradictory version of India's approach to health, which is the empirical world. The germ exists. The germ has been found. It's a scientific fact. And how has India responded to that? With a shambolic, criminal negligence. As a journalist, we have done innumerable stories. The healthcare in India is god-awful. It does not exist. And there, India's approach to health is that health is a privilege of the rich. The poor have absolutely no access and no rights over the idea of health. We have no primary health care. We have no rural doctors. We have no rural hospitals. People are just left to fend for themselves. We spend an huge percentage of our budget on our defense. We spend almost nothing on health. And that percentage that we spend is only for the urban metros, and it's only for the rich. The state is completely withdrawing from the health arena. So every hospital we set up is like a 5-star hotel. It is built on land given almost free because it is supposed to have an outreach for the poor, but there's almost no outreach for the poor. Just in the last 2 years, journalistically, we have done stories on cerebral malaria in the heartland of India, where we have a huge insurgency going on, the Maoist insurgency. All of Indian media, if at all they report, and almost nobody does, but if at all they report on the conflict. The real story in this area is cerebral malaria. Thousands, literally thousands of people are dying there. I lost a reporter last year on the 15th of June. He died of cerebral malaria. It invades the body in a way that it is impossible to describe. I have never seen a body so ravaged as what cerebral malaria does. But that is something that is attacking lakhs of tribals every year. But there is absolutely no healthcare. Not only that, we did a story where this doctor says that these are called lifestyle diseases. People speak of diarrhea, malaria, cholera, tuberculosis, all curable diseases today in the Western world, killing lakhs of people. And people believe that in rural India, because it's good it's good air, it's good water, that people will not get it. And so these are looked at as lifestyle diseases. And he says the only lifestyle that these people have is poverty. And the reason why there is this kind of widespread disease is not just because there's no curatives, but because there is chronic hunger and malnutrition in our country below sub-Saharan levels. And we are not willing to acknowledge that. We are not willing to deal with it. Now, let me give you just some other figures. So I was talking about India's great contribution and significance in the arena of mental health and our intuitive understanding of that inner being, and of all of which is right. But look at our mental health figures, because again, there is the empirical world where you can be psychiatrically, chemically ill. And look at our figures there. We have 43 hospitals to deal with a population of 1.2 billion. We have 65 million people who are chronically, psychiatrically ill. That is more than all of Spain put together. And for that, we have 3,500 certified psychiatrists. We have 1 doctor for every million people. We have 3 nurses for every 10 million people. We have 20,000 beds for 65 million people ill. For encephalitis, which has killed just last year, in 2 months, 500 children died in Uttar Pradesh, just Uttar Pradesh. No media covered it. It was a little piece, like a 3-inch news item. Tehelka covered it. There is one hospital. In the last 50 years, we have lost 50,000 people from just this one state to encephalitis. 500 kids in 2 months last year. We have one hospital, one district hospital, dealing with 19 districts. And that includes people coming from Nepal to deal with encephalitis. Now that is India's approach to healthcare. And that is where I'm saying that we need to learn from the West, because in this moment, Europe is discussing how to dismantle the welfare state. And I think it is appalling that that debate has even come up. Because in India, we don't have the welfare state. We're actually arguing about whatever minuscule welfare state that we are trying to create. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't have health, what do you have? It's an economic issue. It's not just a chivalric issue. It's not just a matter of conscience. And I speak that language because that's the only way you can convince the suits. But it is an economic issue. And even the mental health, the psychiatric health is a point of issue, is an economic issue, because when we did that story, for every one person that is psychiatrically ill, there is a family unit of about 6 people that are disabled by it. Many of them can't go to work, they're giving care at home, because there is no infrastructure to help those who are sick or to even make them functionally able to rejoin the economy in that sense. And so that is something that I feel we must learn from the West. We must bring this scientific approach to health back. Actually, not back. We've never had it. And that is something that, again, because I'm not a historian, I cannot understand why our society has skipped this interest and investment in science. And that's something that I like to learn from. Thank you.